Hello, it's Carol Robertson, PhD here from Psychosensory Academy, and I thought it'd be good to do a short video on how to access my support, my training support material for the course that you're doing. So that's for the Certified Practitioner of the Havening Techniques. So my material, because your main study is going to be at havening.org, let's have a look at that first. We've got that absolutely in our minds. There we are, havening.org. So yeah, so your main training material where you start is at havening.org, and you would log in there to get to your pack. Now I could take you into my portal, but my portal looks a bit different from your portal. So so when you log in, you'll have all your information there that you can follow. Now the support material for this course that I've made for you, we can go into it by going to my main website. So we can go to psychosensoryacademy.com, and then if the menu doesn't come up for you, just click somewhere here and the menu will come up. She says there's the menu, and we want to go into the educational portal. So we're going to just click on educational portal. That takes us to that page. Now there's different portals here. There's a portal for people studying brain sculpture. There's a portal for other short pieces of information I make for people. They maybe go in using a password or a membership. So there'll probably be more portals as time goes on. So this is the portal that you're interested in, which is all about havening. So we're going to click on that to get into the portal. Now that takes you to another website. That takes you to haveningtrainings.com, and basically, as you see, it's asking you to sign up, become a member. So obviously, you've paid to train, that's paid for. So it doesn't cost you anything. You've already paid for that. So you can sign up with any of these and create your account, and you'll get a password and you'll keep that. So I'm a member already, so I'm going to log in. If it's going to let me log in. There we go. So now that I've logged in, you can see it goes to Psychosensory Portal at the top, and it's taken me straight into the menu. You can see here it says navigation menu, so that's where we are. You can see it'll give a picture of you and your name when you join. And because it's support material, I'm talking here about building a strong foundation for your havening practice. And so when you're starting your study, so the place that we advise across the board, the Rudens everybody, what we recommend that you do is you start by reading the primer and using your educational pack of the 3 videos of the Rudens working and talking about their methods, havening techniques, and then do the science review so that you know about the science backing the biology of havening, and that you've become familiar with the terminology. So in the primer, things are explained. It's quite a short book, but things are explained in quite detail. And then after we started using the primer, 10 years ago or more, we as teachers and as practitioners, you need a short way to say things, because you can't constantly be going cognitive, autonomic, somatosensory, emotional. It's too long. You can't be constantly saying, event, landscape, meaning this and inescapable. So what happened is when people started using that material, they started to use acronyms so that they could save time and so they could speak more quickly. So the acronyms for those 2 things that I just listed are CASE and Emily. So in every example that Ron gives in the primer, you will see the Emily and you will see the CASE, once you know what you're looking for. So it just gives us they're checklists really. They're really simple. So maybe even not think of them as acronyms if that doesn't appeal to you. They're checklists, I use them all the time in my practice, and they make such a difference. I find they simplify everything. So you can use a search for this site. There's all sorts of things in it. You can go to the forum. Not everybody likes reading, so I made an audio of the primer for you, so you can listen to the primer, sometimes even hearing somebody talking about it a different way. And in here there are also illustrations. Let's go in. There you go. So there's the first chunk, and there's the key illustrations for that. So there you can see he's outlining his psychosensory therapies. What are psychosensory therapies? And what's slightly different? Why are these psychosensory, but why are they different? Requirements for traumatization. That's just what I was talking about when I was talking about Emily. So event, meaning, landscape, inescapability. Really useful to know, because these are the 4 things that come together for this type of super fast learning to take place. Like I say, all the illustrations are here, so you can be looking at the diagrams and illustrations while listening. Then all these key actions, key sequences that happen. And also we think about other areas of the brain too. So there you get, and there's case there. So CASE, case. And these are important because, well, we're doing this all the time. This is state. This is how we are all the time. So if we're smiling and happy and really enjoying ourselves, we're thinking, I'm happy, we feel fantastic. If we're really sleepy, or we just had our dinner, we feel rested and digested, or we feel excited and looking forward to something, and really motivated or really wowed out by something. Somatosensory is the sensations. It's an area of the brain called the somatosensory cortex, and it's to do with when that part of the brain's active, we experience sensations. So we might experience feeling expansive and sunny, and often when this part of the brain, when the somatosensory cortex is active, we use metaphor. So when somebody's talking a lot with metaphor, we can imagine, we can wonder if their somatosensory cortex is active. So that's what's happening there. And of course, if we are feeling, if we're using our survival system, we may experience that we can't talk, because when we're surviving, say we're surviving from a pack of dogs back in our origins, when that was a major threat to us, because we're a prey mammal, so we were preyed upon by quite small groups of animals. So it makes sense to be quiet and not make a sound. So nowadays, when we feel nervous about public speaking, all those teeth, all those eyes, activates our prey mammal survival system, then we suddenly lose our flow. We feel a block in our throat. We talk about, I've got a block in my throat. That's the somatosensory cortex. It's also the autonomic system in action now. And then we may give meaning to all of that, and we may say something like, I'm scared, or I'm happy, or whatever. And we also communicate. So if you think of us as a prey mammal and how we operate as a group, if somebody is frightened, that's really important for the other members of the group to see, because that threat could be something that affects everybody. So think of deer and how they lift their tail and show the white of the tail. Even showing the white of the eye shows that there's something to watch out for. So emotions are also a communication system, and a communication system to ourselves too. So we know that some emotional responses are a way of calming ourselves or activating ourselves. So there you see it, lots of things going on. So let's go back up. So to get out of that, you just go to the menu. This is the slides from the 2-day course. So if we were doing a 2-day course, these are the slides that we would use. So you can use them. You can see what we'd be doing. And you can see the kind of questions that the Rudens ask. So it's a very interesting way to start the talk, isn't it? How does one enter the system? What is the system? We are the system. So what, how does one enter the system? What activates the system? A scent could, a sight could, words could, thoughts can, touching a texture, looking at a texture, all of these different things. So it really gets us thinking about sensory input and how sensory input is used in other modalities. So, in psychopharmacology, drugs are used to engage with the system, to engage with the brain. The drugs might block receptors, change how receptors behave and respond, or psychotherapy using words, and psychosensory therapy we're using sensory input. So it's quite different. It's its own category, psychosensory. So we've got psychotherapy, we've got psychopharmacology, and we've got psychosensory. Okay, and on it goes. So again, let's go out. And then this one I've just started talking really about, and I'll probably add to it, building a strong foundation. What's it like in practice? Talking about reading the primer. I'm busy talking. It's about weaving the science into the practice. How can understanding neuroscience and biology help practitioners and clients? There's actually loads of ways. This new information is so helpful for us and for clients. So just thinking about that. This is kind of live map where you can click on anything and it will take you. So let's see. I'll close that. So that took us into, I looked at UTS. If you didn't know what UTS was from the primer, you could click on UTS and learn more about unconditioned stimuli. Ron gives us a big list of unconditional threat stimuli in the primer. This is, if you've not heard about this term, it's an old term way back in the 50s. Then this is information about it. There's lots of information in there. This is a fun one about the amygdala. There are projects that you can do, all sorts of different things. Let's go back out. Okay, that's that one. And then very early on, you can start thinking about, you will be thinking about how you're going to use havening, and you'll be self-havening no doubt, and doing all sorts of things, maybe even before you read the primer, because I know you're all curious. This is really about, I don't know which one to look at first. So we'll look at this one, case reflection and review. So we're always reflecting and reviewing our work, and in havening, as you know, you're going to be doing 30 case studies. Now on my training, I'm really looking for you to be showing curiosity and exploring all of the techniques. Now, what are the techniques? We'll have a look at them in a minute. And starting to make notes. Now, as you progress and learn about the biology, you start to think in those checklists I was talking about earlier. You start thinking like a havener. I never thought my thinking would change so much, but now it really has. So that happens. So you're probably going to build on that. So my idea here is that as a project, if you like, you can build your own case study sheet to upload when you do your 30 case studies. So that means that it will progressively develop, and I'm quite happy for that. So if you do your first ones, maybe as you normally would think and write up a case study, that gives me a lot of information about where your thinking is at the moment, and that helps me, in my conversations with you, and I can see your knowledge and your interests and things. And then as you develop, you'll you'll develop. Now, the case study sheets that I use, some of the elements on them were actually generated by the ideas that students had. They gave me those ideas, so maybe your work will add to it as well. So we're all learning all the time. So I think about this, I think about it, I've called it starting, reflecting, reviewing. I think it is a bit like looking in the pool. You know, we can look at the bottom of the pool, or we can look at the reflections on the surface, or we can look at the fish swimming in the middle. There's lots of different ways we can look at the work that we've done. And the idea really of reflecting, well, I suppose there's lots of ideas, but a useful idea of reflecting is that we improve, that we get better next time. So it's good to film yourself, watch yourself, do things differently, experiment, and that's what I'm looking for in your case studies. I'm not looking for 30 like brilliant genius, you know, somebody, you know, having brilliant results. I'm more looking that you're exploring and questioning and wondering about things, and also I'm really interested in case studies where you encountered some kind of difficulty. You know, perhaps the person was at 0 and said, oh, who am I? If I'm at 0, who am I? Or they got frightened doing working memory, or you couldn't get a good amygdala activation, or they didn't want to create a new story for outcome havening. Or there's lots of things, quite common things that occur, and they're really useful to talk about. So if you encounter any of those things, and I've certainly encountered all of those things many times, I'm here to help. So, you know, do feel totally okay about sharing those things. That's the idea of the course, is not that we're totally brilliant, but that we learn this, and there's lots to learn. I found out there was quite a few new skills that I needed to develop, which was fine. It was good. So this is a kind of story about how you can think about case studies. So I'll leave you to read about it. An idea of how you structure your session. I've used a metaphor for that. Must have been using my somatosensory cortex that day. And that's the same thing, but it's in an arrow diagram rather than popping it in the metaphor of a river. So this is the most kind of simple way of writing up a case, is to just write a narrative about it, and then I'm starting to explain what you could add in. So it would look as simple and as clean as that. You would put your havening techniques there in some kind of order that you use them, so I can sort of imagine the session. And then this is the kind of sheet that you might find yourself starting to use. So in my work, I start off always finding out what the person likes and loves for many reasons, so that I can introduce havening, so that I can see how I could get them jolly again, considering that I'm probably going to be helping them to activate their amygdala. It's also good to know how to move them out of that again. You know, so if you know what makes them smile, that makes a big difference. It makes a big difference to them as well, because they can use that. It also helps create a balance, that the person realises the session's not all about being upset, and that they're not all about being upset, that they have a balanced history. They have successes and things that they love, choices they make. So, and then just thinking about landscape, so thinking about history taking. At the beginning of a session, we really want to know. We don't always get to find out, but if we can, it's really important, if we can, is to find out if the person has got a current unconditional threat stimuli active in their life at the moment. So that could be that they have an abusive partner. It could be that they'd have a dangerous job or a dangerous hobby. It could be that they are thinking they're going to lose something of value that's currently happening. They might be going to court, they might be thinking they're going to jail, they might be ill, might have had a diagnosis. They might be worried about a diagnosis. There's all sorts of, they might have an aggressive dog next door, they might have a pet that's dangerous. There's all sorts of things. It's quite good to kind of have a list of those in your head, so you know them, so you can recognise them. And the session's going to be different if there's an unconditional threat stimuli. How you work in the session is going to be different. So what you might also find in this is that they might be telling you about the history and telling you about their presenting issue, and so I've got those two together, and you might think this they've got a medical issue that they've not had checked out, or they've had it checked out but not noticed. For instance, ringing in one ear. I had a client with ringing in one ear, and it, they said on their form when they wrote to me that they had, and in their letter, that they had tinnitus. But you ask questions, and they didn't have tinnitus, they had a brain tumour. So when they said to me it was just ringing in the one ear, I asked about what they'd said to the doctor and so forth, and found out that they hadn't had checks. They said they'd had checks, but they hadn't had checks. So we didn't do anything really, with a bit of education in that session, and agreed to meet again after seeing the doctor. So really, and they were frightened to go to the doctor. So the session ended up about giving them the courage to get to the doctor, and putting the homework in that they get back in touch with me once they got to see the doctor. Now that person said to me later, I saved their life. So the referring, can be really great. It can be really rewarding to refer. We don't have to feel that we have to solve everything. Sometimes coming to us is an important step in guidance to the professional that's going to be able to help them most. So it's also good to have people you can refer to, so that you're really confident about. And that tends to, if you've already got practice, I'm sure you've already got that tends to build as you work. So then if there was no current UTS, then you would be looking at listening to what they're saying about their presenting issues. Having had this good start, you know them quite well already before you do this, and you're looking for what cues it, and you're looking for what they experience. And then because we don't work really with the presenting issue, we're usually working with the brain structure that's generating this presenting issue. Then we're going to be looking for key EMLI. So we're going to be looking for that. So then you would write that up, because that's where you're going to work, and then you would be working out what you're going to do. So you might be using event havening or outcome havening, and these are just a list of questions that you might ask. So so you could copy this page as many times as you wanted to use it. So it might be sometimes you write a case study up and you really write about how interesting the outcome havening was, or how interesting the transpirational havening was, or the event havening, or the informational havening. You don't have to write in detail about each one. It's more like telling me where you've had these learnings and noting it. So you can think about the case studies as a way of noting things for yourself. So sometimes the case studies will come quite quickly as you start, because you have lots of, usually there are lots of eureka moments at the beginning, like the first event havening's been really fast and these kind of things. Or it might be that you do lots and lots of cases over the year, and you just choose to write about the ones that really interest you, or that you want to share with me for some reason. So there's just lots of ideas there. So how to build your own, you can make your own one. Just the things I'm looking for gives you there. Yeah, okay, so we want to go out, so go out. Projects. Okay, so I know that not everybody wants to start by reading the primer. I think that reading the primer is really important. You're going to have to do it at some stage. I do think the best time is at the beginning. But if you don't want to start by reading the primer and you want to kind of get going, or you want to do a mixture, I suggest a mixture is a good balance, because we know about long-term potentiation, we know about how we learn. So from what we know about how we learn, then it's best to do little bits and apply, little bits of study the science and apply, study the science and apply, reflect, review. So I've made projects, I've got loads of projects, and you can write up some of them as case studies, so they're a bit of a win-win, because some of them are just 5 minutes, but they cover very important concepts that are in the primer, but they cover them in a experiential way. So let's have a look at what we've got. So and then I've made a list here of the things that are in the primer and that are important. And then, so here's things like different projects. So things like this one, project, content, complex content and context, really important project. And it's in a section called How We Learn. And this is the project here. So it's a very simple little project, and it concerns what we're using all the time. So when clients are accessing something that's happened, say they got bitten by a dog or attacked by a mugger or something like that, when they recall that, when they encode all the information, the brain sort of sorts it. And Ron gives us a really nice checklist for how it's sorted, and that's called content, complex content and context. And so here I've made a fun image of it, because it's easier to learn when we're looking at things that are funny, but it's exactly the same if it was a dog biting or a mugging. So here the photographer has spent ages and ages and ages trying to get a photograph of the kingfisher way on the other side of the lake, trying not to disturb it and everything, and he's sort of hugely amazed because the kingfisher has come and landed on his camera and is looking at him. So it's funny, yeah? So when he recalls this, that's him down below, he's recalling it, he gets an image, and the content is the kingfisher. And you can see how the complex content has sort of faded out, it's just all gone green. But actually look at it all, there was all these complex branches and lake and probably people walking around and noises and all sorts of things. So the person is, when they recall, they access that, and the most important thing becomes the content, and often the complex content is faded out. And then when you do havening, what happens if this was something upsetting, if this was a dog biting or something, then what would happen is that this content starts to fade, and the client starts to say things like, I can't access it, I can't reach it, it's not there, I know what happened but it's not there. And then they may have a new perception when they access a bit more after the event havening, and they may say that you know, they were there in the place and it was sunny, but everything else seems to be, you know, like the bird is like a little photograph away in the distance or something. So I'm trying to draw that. So that's why these things are really important, because it gives you really good information about what's happened during the process of the receptors being absorbed and how the person perceives that. So it's not that they're going to say, yeah, I notice my receptors have been absorbed. They're going to say things like, oh, you know, I can't access the picture. And if you work like me and you ask about these things, then the descriptions you would get are the changes of I work with format, so the changes of the size of the picture or the colour of the picture change. So you see there it goes from being vivid colour to being sort of monochromatic. and sort of simplified. So these are from an actual case. So the client said that she couldn't visualize at all, everything was black, couldn't see any future or anything. After using some event havening, she noticed a light, so really like a tunnel, a light at the end of the tunnel. And then she saw some flowers, they were sort of monochrome, they were far away. And then these were the flowers that she wanted to give at her grandmother's funeral. And so there's this beautiful bunch of flowers which became brighter and stronger and clearer. So at the end of havening, she then, when she was recalling the death of her grandmother and not being allowed to go to the funeral, now she imagined these beautiful flowers that she could give to her grandmother. So she actually changed the outcome. So the outcome was that she could give that gift to her grandmother, and she then made a printout of this picture to have and to keep, so that she could feel good about loving her grandmother, really. And then this is just sort of thinking, so it's exploring content. So just lots of ideas about content, some more stuff about what goes on in the amygdala, hippocampus. A really great video about how we forget and what we do. And then this is the project. So it's a bit of reading, and obviously it's key reading to the primer. And then these are a couple of videos that you can do. So you can watch and choose 3-minute clips. And doing this gives us a way of starting to think about landscape. It helps us start thinking about these early events that people have experienced which relate to Emily. So you'll see some of these babies, they're virtually having an Emily because of how people are behaving around them, and other babies are really supported, and it's quite different. So we can see these different learnings take place. This video's absolutely great, it really shows it well. And then this is what you'd fill in. So it takes about 5 minutes, and this is the bit that you would upload. That's us at the end there. So again, but let's zoom up and see what this whole section was about. So this whole section is about how we learn. So in the primer we're looking at very fast learning and how it works. But when we're teaching somebody something like havening touch or informational or affirmational, and they're learning something, or they have a new insight after event havening, what's happening is ordinary learning is taking place. So it's really useful to understand ordinary learning. It also helps you understand super fast learning. For example, when you learn how to ride a bike, you make AMPAR receptors. So we're doing that all the time, making biomarkers. So this is great. Just if you don't speak German, just turn the volume down. It's really good, probably the best animation I've seen of AMPAR receptors in ordinary learning. And you can see the vesicles and the neural traffic, how the AMPAR receptors behave and so forth. So that's in the chemical part of the process. It's also an electrochemical process of learning. These are really good too. And then here's a project too. So there's different projects. So we can go back to projects. We've got one here that's got go to project lists and links. It's further down. Yeah. So these are all live as well. So the ones with stars you can do as case studies. So starting a session. So there's a big section on case, which is state. Thinking about state. This is a graph of how your havening sessions are ideally. So we can see each of the techniques down here, so different techniques, and then here's a key to it. So this golden yellow is healthy, helpful states, so they're probably going to be making dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, laughing. So let's look at event havening. It is time-wise, this is like the length of time of the session. Obviously sessions are different lengths, so it's a generalised thing that I've made here. So this is session length. For event havening, that's going to be like 5 minutes. For outcome, it's going to be 20 minutes, but it's percentage wise. So percentage wise of that 5 minutes, they're mostly going to be smiling, laughing, neutral state, absolutely fine. This tiny percentage here, they're going to have an amygdala activation. This little piece here is as they move from amygdala activation into this more pleasant state, and they finish up with this pleasant state. Amplify havening, you want to start with a pleasant, so you're not starting with any of this, it's starting on a pleasant and finishing on a pleasant, so you're just you're amplifying. Affirmational is the same, starting on a pleasant and moving through. Look at transpirational, very different. Amygdala activity, amygdala activity, amygdala activity, emotional states, so it's emotional case, and then moving into more helpful emotional case, and then maybe a bit emotional again, and then to this healthy, helpful states, healthy, helpful case. Outcome havening sort of starts off usually with a bit of emotional state, and then a changing state into this helpful emotions, and then helpful, laughing, strong feeling, enabled feeling, lots of agency. So in all of your havening, it's mostly going to be this kind of state. So my husband always says that he just hears all the laughing coming from our studio, and the clients are working on things that have been very very upsetting when they happen. So havening's wonderful that enables us to do that. So if I'm not getting this golden yellow going on, then I'd be stopping and starting again and making sure that I could do that, the exception being transpirational. So so this is all about how we learn all sorts of different things. So there's a lot there, and it ties it in with the primer. These are images from the primer connecting up what we're talking about, showing you where case is. So state is important when somebody experiences what's generally called as traumatization, because that's where it's going to be encoded in that moment. And so they might be feeling really happy, they might be feeling in love, and that's going to be the context, and that's going to be encoded by the brain. So that might mean, so say they were feeling really, really in love and they got a terrible fright, saw their partner with somebody else or something, then next time they feel really, really in love, then the receptors are going to match that. The information is going to be matched, the sensory input is going to be matched, the receptor is going to be active, traffic's going to flow, and they're going to be experiencing survival system. So however they do survival system, it might be they get chronic pain, it might be they want to escape, it might be they get irritated, whatever happens, that will be what they experience. So the feeling loved up, feeling in love would be the cue for survival mode. So it would be a cue for amygdala, the receptors in the amygdala that they made to become active again. So it's important that way, and it's important also that we're noticing that. We notice whether the person uses somatosensory a lot, or they notice their autonomic a lot, or they notice their cognitive a lot. We're noticing all of those things in the presenting issue, and how people also notice their change. So they might really notice the change after event havening. they may say, oh, my feet feel more relaxed, or my throat feels open, or they might notice the cognitive and say, oh, that internal dialogue has stopped, or it's changed, or the picture, I can't access it anymore, if that makes sense. So we show that after depotentiation that they don't, the components are delinked. And we have to remember as well that the case that's encoded won't necessarily be the case that we see as a result. So some people might say symptoms won't necessarily be the same. Might be, it won't necessarily be the same though, it could be different. So okay, let's go out of here. So that's really how to start. Do the primer, consider the material for the 2-day course. In relation to reading the primer, it's quite helpful. Think about building that strong foundation, think about cases, think about practical ways of learning, like doing the project for complex content, 5-minute project, but it means that you're set up then, really thinking with that frame, and it's such a useful frame. And then this is support material for all the different things. So as I was saying, it's really useful to know how we learn, the biology of how we learn, especially because you're teaching Havening Touch. You're teaching to think in different strategies when you're doing informational. You know, what if I could learn easily? To somebody who thinks they can't learn easily. What if I can? What would that be like? How might that work? Introducing unconditional threat stimuli, and Emily, introducing cases, which is state, as I was saying. Introducing Havening Touch can be quite a lot, can be very simple. 99% of the time it's really simple. It's useful to know, to have lots of strategies when it's not simple. And also, if you have a really good prep, it becomes really simple, usually. Introducing Havening techniques, skill sets for Havening, event Havening. So what have we got for event Havening? You can just click on that, it takes you in. So just thinking about how event Havening might relate to something that we see in the wild. So in the wild, when I talk about in the wild, I mean, you know, naturally, things that go on, somebody who doesn't know about Havening. So the example I give here is, if we think about when we're with toddlers and they have a tumble, what do? We wipe the tears from their face, we open their palms, we look and see if there's any gravel, we, you know, brush away any gravel, we give them a hug. Think about Havening Touch. And we usually use working memory activities. If we know they like birds, we might say, hey, was that a hawk that flew past, or was it a seagull? If we know they like their auntie and having ice cream, we might say, weren't we going to visit auntie? What's the name of that ice cream shop near her house? Or we might evoke empathy and oxytocin and some nonsense games and say, gosh, look what you did to the road, poor road, what a bump. So we get them smiling again. Now if we think about the biology, we can think about how that relates to Havening, and I explain the rest there. I'll let you read it. About those receptors of being absorbed again. And then some information about event Havening, how, you know, what's the aim of it. So we're activating receptors, and then our next aim is we're going to absorb those receptors. It's the person that's going to do it. So the person's going to activate the receptors, the person's going to absorb receptors, and then they're probably going to create receptors after that, because they're going to start having new insights. And then this is a case study from the primer. It's basically, I'm just showing it all as if we were working with it. So I'm kind of going in, chunking down, showing you the detail of it, if you like. So Ron's very good at writing things very simply, but sometimes it can be really helpful to look at all the tiny details within that. What's that like? And then looking at the idea of the principles compared to what event Havening looks like. So often when you're in a session, say it's a child and the family are there, the family may be expecting the session to be a lot of crying and being upset, and there you are with the child's thought about the scary thing that happened in the car park at the supermarket, what they saw, for only 30 seconds, a minute, just to notice everything they notice when they recall, what happens to them when they recall. So they notice that they clench their teeth and they tighten their hands and they start rocking and they feel upset, and then they can, in their mind's eye, they can see the thugs as they surrounded the car, and they can see how, you can remember how the car rocked, and they can see one particular face peering into the window, and that's the content. So they might not tell you all of that, but they might tell you that later, but you can see that they're accessing well. So 30 seconds to a minute of accessing, and then you start doing some, like with the toddler that tumbles, you start doing some working memory activities, maybe some arithmetic, counting backwards, imagining being somewhere they've never been before and trying to count at the same time, or humming, or doing different things, or each making up a story with you, and then both of you trying to remember what that story is, and so forth. And so doing working memory activities, so displacing the information about what happened in the supermarket with lots of new information, so the working memory is now full of that new information, and the information about the scary thing is displaced. And then doing that for 3 minutes to 5 minutes, and doing Havening Touch at the same time as doing the fun working memory activities, and then checking in with what the response is now when he recalls the experience outside the supermarket, and when he recalls after doing the event evening, there's no fear. So he doesn't clench his teeth, he doesn't look distressed. He says he's a new insight, and he says, I did the right thing, the car was locked, I just stayed quiet, maybe they didn't even see me, I knew everything would be okay, I'm glad that's over, I won't insist on staying in the car in the future. And, it was a bit horrible, but his moving into survival system isn't happening anymore, and he can't access the picture, and they seem, he says that when he recalls it now, they seem much smaller, more like children, and they were maybe just kind of playing. So he has a bit of a different insight to it. That's me doing a demo of Event Havening. This is the first time, it's an old video, it was the first time I worked when the person said that they didn't like normal, what we call distractions. So the things I've just been describing. So he didn't want to do any maths, he didn't want to do any humming, didn't want to do any nursery rhymes, didn't want to do any imagining being anywhere. So what I did was I activated the working memory by talking about the science, and just going a little bit faster than he could go, so that he had to use his working memory, and he basically overloaded his working memory, so he couldn't keep up. So he's trying hard to keep up, and he can't keep up because he wants to remember, but it's too much information. And then this is a guided video that you can follow along to experience Event Havening yourself. So I quite often, when I'm working with clients, we quite often use watching a film and then maybe talking about what's in that film afterwards as a working memory activity. What do they remember with the cloud? What colour were the clouds? Were there cats in the video? Was there an island? What kind of birds were they? That kind of thing. What was the name of the boat? So you can, once you understand working memory, you can use something like this film to do that. I like this metaphor about being like a sticky note. And we know that we've done really good working memory activity when we get kind of jammed, when we draw blank. So there's a project there you can do. So again, we can come out of here. So you can imagine each of the techniques has information like that. So you can click on any one, ideas. Affirm. Not letting me. I have a link that doesn't work. Nobody said to me. I have to fix that one. And sometimes they're films. So this is a film of me talking about different ways that you can use transpirational. So I hope that's helpful. And then, as have we got in here? All the techniques. Links to projects, working memory activity. This is a little film I made about setting up. That's not let me in there. So there must be a few of these not. I have to change the link. That one's working. Okay, so I'll change that. Anything you find is not working, let me know, because otherwise I won't know. Great. And then when you're done, you can just close or log out. It's up to you. There's not much going on in the forum at the moment, but you can make more go on in the forum. And I've done a little bit, and I shall do more. And I'm always learning, so I update information, and hopefully I'm always improving, and I hope it's really useful to you. So I hope this is helpful.